Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. I usually walk 9 blocks to the library in my neighborhood to get internet access. And on my way to that library, I usually pass by 2 or 3 public schools, 2 junior high schools, and a high school. And as I was passing by these schools one day, I noticed that the kids had on uniforms. And that made me think about how, in spite of all of the changes we make to our public education system, that the quality of it continues to decline. Now, I think about the days of when I went to public school, IS 148 in the Bronx and Park West High School, and the subpar education I got in both of those environments, and how dysfunctional those environments were. And I look at today's public school system, and it's just progressively worse than it was back then. Back then, there was a problem with discipline and structure, but these days, it's like the whole system has completely collapsed in spite of all the resources we put into it. It seems like to me that with each generation of individuals we put into the public school system, they get progressively dumber in spite of us increasing the standards, for this education. Because I remember when my family member was going to be a teacher in the New York City public schools, she pretty much, they were told her she needed a master's degree to become a teacher. And then they put all these rigorous, stringent standards on all of these teachers. Yet we look at the finished product of all those rigorous standards and those master's degrees, and it's a dumber individual than a person from my generation or even the past generation of the 1950s. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, we put all these resources into these kids, yet they come out progressively dumber. What are we doing wrong? Because if you're putting more resources into something and it gets progressively worse, there's clearly something wrong with the process. We put less resources into people in the 1950s, and people from the 1950s were as smart as today's college graduates. People from my generation, yes, we had problems, but we could at least function in a professional setting. These days, we have teachers with master's degrees, we have, all this rigorous curriculum, all these rigorous standards, yet my other family member who works at a college is running into individuals who can't even function on a job, who cannot even function at an internship. People who think that they can't, that the job is supposed to be for them. They think they're supposed to come in anytime they feel like, and they can dress any way they feel like. They don't have any business skills. They don't have any soft skills. They don't have any social skills. And even worse, they don't even have any academic skills. So I look at America's education system, and clearly it's a broken and dysfunctional system. I mean, we again put all these resources in it to raise the bar, yet the people coming out of it are of a low standard. And I look at that, and again, that's really sad to think about, especially when you think about the changes that have been implemented over the last 30 years, such as closing schools and then reopening them with new staff, implementing uniforms to make some sort of everybody sort of uniform, changing the curriculum with Lucy Calkins here in New York, and all these other changes. Yet the dropout rate still remains high, and when even if these people do graduate, they are not even able to function on the level of a graduate from my generation or the generation of the 1950s, where these people could highly function, and they were so functional that with just a high school diploma, these individuals could go into the job market without a problem. These people of today, they get into high school, they come out of high school and cannot even function in a junior college or even a college from the City University of New York, which is of a lower standard. These people can't function on that level. And that's really, again, says a testament to all these resources we're pouring into our failing public school system. I mean, you put more, this is the only system I see where you put more money in and the product gets progressively worse. When in any other business system, if the product is bad, they stop making the product and then they take a look at their process and say, look, if this isn't working, we need to go do something else. But from what I've learned from my family members, who worked in education and work in education right now, that the problem is that you have people who are in education who are just eggheads who are sitting, at a desk in an office, and they're not in the field to see what really functions. And because they're sitting in an office thinking about numbers and standards and statistics, they're not on the ground looking at what works. They're thinking of things from an intellectual level. They're not connected to the people to see what truly works with education. And this is one of the big problems with education in America, is that we have a lot of people who are just, they're in offices and they're administrating, but they're not connected to the end product, which is the children, and teaching them, in a way that's constructive to them. They want to push all these high standards and put all these academic rigor on people, thinking that if I make it rigorous, it's going to make the child smarter, not understanding that there are certain things that certain children can learn, and there's only so much a child can learn, and that certain processes, are just basically part of life. These guys are, again, caught up in themselves, but they're not thinking about the child. And when you look at the end result, which is what I saw, every day walking down the street, is I'm seeing dysfunctional individuals who can't function, and my other family member is seeing more dysfunctional individuals who can't function. These are, again, people who do not know how to read or write. They do not know how to write a paragraph. They do not know how to write a sentence. And these are people going to college. And that's embarrassing when you think about it. We have poured all these resources talking about how we want higher standards, yet the students who are supposed to be better students based on those higher standards are of poorer quality. I mean, when you have a guy with a master's degree who pretty much can't teach an individual to function on a level where they can go out and do things like fill out a basic job application or basically read a book from cover to cover, that says something about your process. That says that even there's something wrong with the way you're doing things, because this person should be able to function in a college. This person, with all these intellectuals and all these educated people, this person should be able to function when they've passed high school. A high school diploma should actually be of higher quality now, based on all those standards, than the guy of the 1950s. But the guy of the 1950s is smarter than the guy from the 21st century. That's a completely backwards thing when you think about it, when you think about American education. And when I think about American education, you know, it is one of the most broken institutions in this society. We're supposed to be educating people and preparing them to go out in the world. But when I look at most education, from what my family member tells me it's all about here in New York, it's all about tests, it's all about cramming, and it's all about, drilling and reading. And it's not about giving somebody a balanced education and a balanced social education. It's just about numbers and statistics. And that's not what education should be about. It should be about, giving this person the best education possible and giving them an environment where they can feel safe to learn. And we're not doing that with American education. Um, when I look at American it's just a mess. And when I look at one of the biggest problems with education is that everybody keeps thinking that it's the schools, but the schools can only do so much. And one of the big problems with education that I've learned from both of my family members who work in education and worked in education is that no one wants to touch the big elephant in the room, which is the family. Now, the family is a core part of education because, again, I go back to that old African proverb that David Carroll talks about all the time, which says, you know, a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women. And as the woman goes, so goes the race. And when I look at the decline in education, I can tie it to the females in American society because American females have a low moral position and they pretty much have no interest in educating their children. They don't see it as something valuable. Your females see social currency as something valuable. They don't see academic excellence as something valuable. Now, in previous generations, like my generation and the generation before, academic excellence was seen as something valuable because those women had a high moral position. And because those women had a high moral position, they had a high standard for what they wanted their children to do and what they wanted them to accomplish. And those kids pretty much saw that as a standard. Today's single mothers don't see that as something valuable. They see holding and having an iPhone as something important. They see hair and nails as something more important. They see Air Jordan tennis shoes as something important, but reading a book, that's not important to them. Thinking about learning how to do math, that's not important to them. For them, that's considered acting white in the inner cities. And in white communities, again, they see being celebrities and being in reality shows, that's more important, or being among the cool people as being more important than getting an education. We have devalued education in the family, and the moral position of the women, again, relates to why our education system has declined in spite of people having advanced degrees, having increased resources, and having, all these curriculums and standards. Because again, as I see it, it's the moral position of the women, but you can't say anything about that because if you say something about the family, then the mothers start getting angry, they start getting upset, and they start getting defensive instead of saying that, yes, I have a part in this, in my child's education. I have to take my child's education into my own hands. I just can't expect the school to do everything, and both of us have to work together. But as I look at our American education system, no one wants to take responsibility for it, and the reason why they don't want to take responsibility is because, again, they're too scared of being held accountable for anything, and they don't want to be able to somebody to say, look, this is your end product, this is your end result. However, we can clearly see your end product and your end result, which are these dysfunctional individuals who graduate high school, can't function in college, and those who BS their way through, get on a job, and think they can go to need their parents to go with them to a job interview. Is this the end result people want to say that they're proud of? A grown man who needs his mother and his father to go with him to a job interview? I thought the end process of education was to prepare an individual so that they could go out and do things on their own. But when I look at the end result of today's education system, which has the most educated teachers, the higher standards, I look at the end result of that education system and I shake my head because we now have all these people talking about you need all these advanced degrees to get this teaching job, and then we have all these rigorous standards, and then we have this new curriculum, yet the end result is an adult male who needs his mother and father to go with him to a job interview. If you're not embarrassed by that, there's something wrong with you, because a guy from the 1950s with a junior high school education could go out here and get a job on his own. A guy from the 1980s could go out here and get a job on his own. And this person from the 21st century with all of this advanced technology, teachers with advanced degrees, advanced standards, needs his mother and father to go with him to a job interview. You look at that big picture, and it clearly shows you how dysfunctional American education is and how dysfunctional our society has become, because no one wants to confront the real problem regarding American education, which is the low moral position of American women. That's all I have to say for this video. We can comment, rate, and subscribe.